Welcome to our program, Coach-to-Coach. Today's guest is Tracy Hawkins. Tracy is a barefoot trained coach and is studying a Master's of Science Psychology at Sheffield Hallam University to add to her executive MBA. Tracy's helping mid-career professionals make intentional choices about what comes next with clarity and confidence. Thanks for joining us today, Tracy. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Coach-to-Coach.
Thank you for having me, Greg.
Yeah, it's great to be here. The way I like to start these off is to ask what first sparked your interest in coaching?
Yeah, so it's probably a bit of a cliche, but I think coaching probably found me before
Mm,
I found coaching. So from a young age, supporting people and helping people had always come quite naturally to me. And then in my corporate career, I spent 15 years leading teams. And I think when I look back on that time, I probably quite naturally gravitated towards a coaching style of leadership.
mm,
So helping people think through problems, decisions, transitions, etc., rather than telling them what to do. And over time, I realized it was those conversations that I found really meaningful. And I got a lot of kind of intrinsic reward from supporting through those conversations. And as you mentioned, I've got my executive MBA, and it was that curiosity that led me to focus on employee flourishing within
mm,
that MBA. So I looked at kind of what are the conditions that need to be in place to enable somebody to flourish at work. I'm a strong believer that we spend so much time at work. It's such a big part of our lives that we deserve the opportunity to have meaning from it and flourish from it. And I
mm,
think kind of where that took me into coaching, probably for the last decade now, whenever somebody had said, Tracy, what's your long-term career goal?
mm,
I'd always kind of jokingly say, long-term for me is my pre-retirement gig. And my
mm,
pre-retirement gig, uh, as I say, for about a decade now, I've said was to be a coach. And I think the turning point came in 2022 when I experienced redundancy for the first time from
mm,
my corporate organization. I'd been there for 17 years, so it was something that hit quite hard. And I worked with an incredible coach at that point who I'm still in touch with today. And I think experiencing coaching from the other side really helped me to see the power, the transformation that can happen through that partnership. And at that point, we talked about me moving into coaching and setting out on my coaching journey. But the timing wasn't right at that point. But then last year, redundancy came around for the second time.
mm,
And I just thought, this is my signal. This is my signal from the world telling me that this is my motive. This is my moment. I
yeah,
need to do something for me and to pursue that dream. So, kind of end of last summer, I took the decision, kind of brave. It felt very risky, but probably inevitable as well. I took the decision to leave the corporate world and embark on what I called a purposeful pause to
mm,
gain my formal coaching qualifications and start building my coaching practice. And that's where I am now.
mm. I love your story. I love how the universe works in a way. You didn't get the message on the first redundancy, so it's like it'll come back around and give you another another
Yeah.
knock at the door. Um, yeah, it's great. I had a similar experience in my corporate career when I look back and go, oh, I hadn't realized it, but I'd basically been a coach my whole career and not even known it. So yeah, it's really cool. Well, now that you've taken the plunge into the official coaching world, I'm curious about what you're building. If you could tell us about your practice and how you're working and who you're working with, that would be great.
Yeah, so I'm very early days in my practice and building my business, which is exciting. It's a huge excitement. It's something I've wanted for a long time, but it's also a huge learning curve.
Mm,
One of the decisions that I made very early on, kind of at the end of last summer, was that I wanted to build a psychologically informed coaching practice. So I wanted to move beyond kind of transactional coaching, focused on, goal setting, action planning. Those things are really important, and they
Mm.
matter to individuals, but I wanted to go kind of below the surface and go deeper into what really sits underneath our decisions, our behaviors, our patterns. And that's what led me to set out for studying my master's in psychology. So I'm doing that alongside building the business so that I can have that kind of psychological grounding. And I think what that gives me is that I'm really interested in the roles of things like values, beliefs, identity, strengths, and the how those things interplay into how we navigate work and life transitions and decisions. And I think that really stems from the redundancy that I talked about, that first one. My identity was defined by the organization because I'd been there such a long time. And what that coaching experience helped me to do was separate Tracy Hawkins from the organization that I was in that was I was working in at the time. So yeah, I think having that psychological grounding is really important to me. And I think
Mm.
the other thing at the heart of my kind of coaching philosophy, if I can even say that word,
Yeah.
um, is that I believe people have the answers. They have the answers within themselves, but the hamster wheel of life, if we might want to call it that,
Mm.
doesn't give us the space or the time to think things through and to kind of untangle those thoughts and things that are important to us. So I think in terms of how I work, I see myself as that thinking partner.
Mm.
So I'm really about kind of creating that reflective space that people don't ordinarily get in their day-to-day lives, to help them to slow down, to untangle what's going on for them and reconnect with what's meaningful and purposeful. I was describing it with somebody on a discovery call earlier this week, and coaching's about a piece of string and it's all jumbled up like this. And what coaching's there to do is to kind of help the individual, help the client untangle that string and just bring a bit more structure to that thinking and a bit more structure that helps them get to what is that new direction and
Mm.
where they're wanting to go. And then in terms of who I'm supporting, as I say, it's relatively early, but the kind of area that I'm focusing on is mid-career professionals. So those mid-career professionals who are thinking, what's next? So that might be someone who is stepping into their first leadership role and kind of figuring out, how do they become effective in that leadership role? It might be someone who is striving for a promotion and needs some support in kind of what are the steps that they need to get that promotion. Or it could also be people who are going through kind of similar transformations that I did in terms of the redundancy and thinking about that career change. And I think a lot of my work, as you mentioned in the intro, is about helping people make those intentional choices about what comes next with
Mm.
clarity and confidence. So it's about helping people be intentional about their choices rather than drifting into the next thing because that's what they've always known, it's what they're comfortable with, it's kind of what they think they should do. So yeah, it's about helping people make those intentional choices, and I do that through my career clarity program,
Mm.
which is really designed to help people pause, understand themselves, explore possibilities, and then move forward. And as I say, I think why this is important to me is because I've been through these transitions myself. I've got that lived experience.
Mm.
I know how difficult and how emotional some of these transitions can be without the right support and the space to think clearly. So this is kind of my way of giving back for
Yeah,
other people.
that's great. Yeah, and I mean, very timely too, I think, because the world is a very turbulent place right now, and um, I can't tell you how many people I talk to who the word redundancy comes up. It's almost like the most common thing. And the thing with redundancies is, which when it happened to me in my career, um, it's one of those things that cuts against kind of at least for me my longstanding beliefs, which was if I work hard and I contribute and I'm loyal, like all these things, then I'll be fine. And redundancy basically, it doesn't matter what your status is as an individual employee or your performance. It's just the company has made a decision to cut headcount or budgets or whatever it is, and you're just happen to be on that list, notwithstanding anything you've ever contributed. Like it really has nothing to do with you other than the fact that it's affecting you. And
Yeah,
that's a tough
exactly.
pill
And I
to
think,
swallow.
yeah, it is a tough pill. And I think, the reality is kind of going back, there used to be the philosophy of a job for life.
Yeah.
Job for life doesn't exist anymore. And
No.
and careers are so different now. And people, you know, redundancy is a much more common thing.
Mm,
Um, and when it happens to you, it does feel personal. It's
yeah.
not, as you say, it's you're just on a list, but it does feel personal, and that's why it kind of feels like that emotional challenge. And yeah, as you say,
Yeah.
there's so many more people experiencing it now than
Yeah.
ever before.
Yeah. And with AI and all the rest of it, it's only going to get more. I do love what you said about identity. 'Cause I mean, I had a similar experience too, where when I left my career, uh, my identity was in shambles because it was like, I was that guy. I was
Mm.
whatever my role was, and I was the go-to guy, and I was the expert, and I was the all these things, and then overnight, I wasn't any of those things anymore. And
Mm.
it was like being in lost in the wilderness. Like who even am I now without this job? And I love that in coaching is that we help people kind of realize that that was all an illusion anyway. That was never who you really were, and help them rebuild an identity that is not linked to any particular job or aspect of their life. It's kind of upstream from all those things. So it's I like to think of it as the gateway to freedom because it's once you're at that place and have that identity, then you're the circumstances in your life aren't as relevant. You can do anything, and you're intact. So it's great when you can point people in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that, I can't think what the phrase is, but kind of, you're not the version of yourself tomorrow
Mm,
that you were yesterday.
mm,
Every day we are building our new identities and evolving the version of ourselves,
yeah,
which is helpful to think of it in that way sometimes.
yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I like to think of it when people watch these interviews that I do with coaches like yourself. They're not the same person at the end of watching this interview as they were at the beginning because they hopefully will have seen something fresh and new, and it's the same for all of us with everything we kind of consume. Um, Very cool. I'm wondering if you can share one or two examples of how coaching has helped either yourself or some of your clients, just to illustrate kind of what kind of transformations and things are possible for people.
Yeah, so I think the first example I'd share is probably my first client that went through a complete coaching engagement with me. And that individual came to coaching because they were looking for support in how to position themselves for a promotion. So they kind of knew the career path that they wanted to go on, and they were trying to take that next step up. And when they came to coaching, kind of on the surface, they thought the issue that they needed to work around was technical expertise. So they thought the gap that was stopping them make that move up to the next level was kind of the technical expertise, and they wanted to do some work around how they bridge that gap, how they can kind of look at what they need to do to bridge that gap. As we went through the conversations and the coaching sessions, I think it became clear that it wasn't a capability gap per se. That wasn't the barrier. And the word that kept coming up and the deeper challenge was around confidence.
Mm,
So it became clear that actually it was about their confidence in how they spoke about themselves. It was about how they articulated their value. And this individual compared. They had a tendency to compare themselves to others,
mm,
and they were using that comparison to identify what they thought the gaps were in taking them to that next level. So once we'd got to that kind of deeper level on, this isn't about capability, this is about confidence, the coaching conversation really changed. So the coaching conversation went from less about kind of how do I build my technical capability and more about how do I recognize my own unique strengths, experiences, and the value that I bring.
mm,
And how do I talk about that? How do I communicate that in a way that is understood? So we did kind of a number of coaching exercises, and over time they developed greater clarity and confidence in what they brought to the table, who they were as an individual, not comparing to other people, and what value they brought to the roles that they were looking to take. And I think that was probably the biggest mindset shift that that individual shared with me was that they were able to stop comparing themselves to others
mm,
and able to start recognizing their own unique strengths, skills, capabilities. And what that allowed was then they went into new opportunities and interviews with a completely different mindset.
mm,
So where before they weren't getting over the first hurdle in an interview, they were actually progressing through. And in the final coaching session we had, they actually shared that they had been offered a new role, and that was at the promotion level that they were hoping for. So I think why that one resonates with me is because, you know, the individual was able to see much more clearly kind of they move from having that self-doubt and that hesitation in themselves, and were able to see themselves for who they were and backing themselves and projecting that forward in
mm.
interviews to be able to get the role that they wanted. And I think, you know, that's the power of coaching. And it's back to kind of what we were saying earlier, that the individuals have the capability, the individuals have inside them what they need, but sometimes what they need is that kind of time and space and reflection and sometimes a bit of healthy challenge,
Yeah,
to see things a bit differently and build that confidence.
yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I mean, there's lots of things in there that strike me. One is, you know, your confidence as a coach that's in there for them helps them find it for themselves.
Mm,
Um, and then just the way you kind of structured explaining that the capability thing was is a gap of an area that you have to do things to get, whereas the confidence arena is a recognition. It's recognizing what's already there, and it's kind of confidence. I like to think of it as the absence of insecure thinking. So it's like not that you have to do anything to get confidence. It's just you need to see through all your insecure thinking and realize, oh, I'm already confident underneath all this noise. And then when you can operate in the world, i.e., an interview, a conversation, and I mean, and that confidence. I mean, we've all had that experience where somebody walks into the room, and the second they walk through the threshold of that door, you just know that's a confident person, like just the way they're carrying themselves, and that that itself can win the day in an interview. So I love that story.
Yeah, I like what you said there about kind of the voices. It's kind of taming those inner voices, isn't it? The
Mm.
inner critics within our heads of, being able to tame them and just help you to see that actually you do have what you need. It's just about the way that you project and present yourself forward.
Mm.
Yeah, and sometimes that takes time and
Yeah,
inner belief.
absolutely. Yeah, and it's, I mean, that's the thing with coaching is we invite people to explore those things and look at them from different perspectives and consider other possibilities of what their thinking means or how do they relate to it. And then ultimately they'll have an insight and everything changes for them. So I am curious just to go back. One thing that's been uh, kind of in the back of my head as you've been studying your master's of psychology and wanting to build your practice on a foundation of an understanding of psychology. I'm wondering if there's anything as you've been studying where you've looked back on, I don't know, past experiences in your own life or something, and gone, oh my God, that's what's was happening, actually going on in that instance versus what I had thought. And because now I know, I mean, I'm jumping to assumptions here that in your training is like how the system actually works. And I'm wondering if there's any of those big kind of insightful moments that you've had.
Yeah, so I think probably one that I've done recently, actually. It was in the realm of social psychology, and the topic was around why, as people, are we not able to make changes that we know are good for us? So, why don't we make sustained behavior change? What is stopping us? And we did it in the context. The assignment was in the context of health behaviors.
Mm,
So slightly different to some of the coaching world that I do, but it helped me think about why don't I do exercise that I always think I know I should do, but why do I not commit to it and see that through and make it a habit? And it touched on all things about kind of different types of motivation. So if something is intrinsically motivated, if you are doing it because you want to do it rather than kind of some reward or compliance or somebody
mm,
telling you need to do it, you're much more likely to stick to it. It touched on things like habit and the fact that when things are habit, you work in a more automatic way. So you're not really consciously thinking about it. So
mm,
when you're trying to make behavioral change, which I guess some coaching can be, um, you're trying to break those habits. You're trying to break that cycle and establish new habits to help you move forward. And then the bigger one in that space, and again, it does come into things like career coaching and career transitions. It's around the social element. It's
mm,
around what are those kind of people that are significant to you? What do they think and what do they believe you should be doing? But also, what do your peer groups do?
mm,
And then it's about social acceptability of those behavioral changes. So yeah, I think that's one that's kind of top of mind because I submitted an assignment last week on, why don't we do the things that we know are good for us and what's really getting in the way of that?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that topic reminds me of a book I read. I can't remember the author, but it was called Change or Die. And it was about people who have things like heart attacks or, life-threatening things. And it was a study of how, very, very shortly after they have these life threatening episodes, they start eating better, they start exercising, they start doing the things they should have been doing. But very quickly, that new behavior goes away and they fall back into their old habits, even though literally their life is on the line. And
Yeah,
yeah, it's quite an interesting uh, topic to explore. And it points to, I guess, the complexity of the human condition. Like in those cases, like literally your life is hanging in the balance, and people still don't quit smoking or still don't stop drinking or whatever other habitual things they have going on. So yeah, it's quite
yeah,
interesting.
absolutely.
Yeah. Um, I also have to ask you about in the intro. I mentioned you were barefoot coach trained. I'm curious. to understand more what that is. I know looking at your LinkedIn profile, that's I'm assuming that's kind of the name of the program or coaching thing you did, but I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so Barefoot is the coaching provider that I
Hmm.
trained with. So I joined their program September last year. So they run a 4 month program to do your coach training, and that's accredited with the International Coaching Foundation Federation
Wow.
at level two. And for me, a big part of what I wanted to do was I had all the kind of informal career, corporate experience that I did coaching, but I wanted to formalize that. And Barefoot very much are kind of centered on, they teach you the theory, but that you're also doing lots of practice and
Mm.
working with volunteers all the way through the journey. So yeah, I found that a really, hugely valuable course, but also the community. It's creating a community of coaches who are at a similar point in the journey, and you can share their experiences and share their insights. And yeah, so yeah, Barefoot Train Coach is the basically the training provider that I trained with, who I would recommend to people. I found them hugely valuable, and I continue to work with them at the moment. So
Right. Right. Yeah. Community is so huge. It's fun. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and um, I was doing another interview like this, and we were just talking about how it's interesting because there are some people I've come across who think of, doing things like this, like two coaches talking about things like people have said, well, isn't that your competition? You're kind of promoting your competitor. I'm like, well, I don't know. There's 8 billion people on the planet. There's, plenty of people to go around for anyone and everyone who wants to get into coaching and help other people. So I think of it more as a community, and the more we can help each other and support each other and learn from each other, the more people in aggregate that we get to help. So it's yeah, I know I trained with Jamie Smart in the Clarity community, and I've been in there for I guess the last 5 or 6 years, and I know it's yeah, it's like a family more than a community. So it's been awesome.
yeah, it is. And I think that is the thing that if there was one thing that I had to kind of crystallize in terms of the difference between corporate life and my life now, coach
Mm,
life, I think it would be the community. From the get-go, when I kind of stepped into this coaching space, I just really felt that kind of community of coaches supporting coaches, and everyone's there kind of lifting each other up. And that's very different to some corporate experiences, I guess.
mm,
Yeah, so I think that has been really helpful for me. It's been really helpful to kind of find your tribe and find the people that can support on the journey and kind of learn from as well.
mm,
We've been in that study group of Ankush's book on awakening the coach, and I think just learning from each other and sharing those experiences has just been invaluable to me as I've been getting started in my business.
yeah, absolutely. The thing I love about those kind of study groups is it's such a broad audience of people. Like, yes, it's all coaches, but it's a group of coaches that all have kind of different backgrounds, different coach training, maybe operate from different coaching modalities. Some people like you have a psychology background. Other people may have none. Other people from all over the world. I'm in Canada right now, and you're in the UK, I'm presuming.
Yeah.
Um, and when I'm in rooms with people from all corners of the world, the one thing that comes through loud and clear is that how the same we are. We're all humans. We're all dealing with the same thing. Maybe the flavors of it are slightly different, but it's for me it makes a big world feel way smaller. So it's it's very cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. If there's one thing you'd want the audience to take away from this conversation, or that you'd want to leave them with, what would that one thing be?
Yeah, and I think on this one, it's a lot of, as we've talked about, a lot of my work is around careers and kind of work and the role work has. And I think the one thing I'd say to people is that there's rarely, if ever, a perfect time to make a career transition.
Mm,
But given we spend so much of our time at work and it's such an integral part of our lives, and also we're living longer, so the likelihood is we're going to be working for longer.
mm,
So I think it's really important that, we do take that time to align our work to something that is purposeful and meaningful to us as individuals. And, that might mean taking a bold action at an imperfect time.
mm, absolutely. You remind me of the old saying, like, when was the perfect time to plant a tree? Well, that was like yesterday. The next perfect time is today. Like it's um, yeah. Yeah, careers are certainly unfolding much differently today than they probably ever have. Um, and you can probably come up with a long list of reasons why that's not good or uncomfortable or unfortunate. But I like to look at the other side of the ledger, which is all the things that are fun and exciting and challenging and fresh and new. And um, you know, I started this coaching thing when I was like, I guess 47 or something. Like, if you'd ever told me I'd start something brand new at that age, I would have been no way. And now, um, I don't know. Early in my career, I always had this thing: retire at 55 was kind of my thing. Now I'm a couple years away from 55, and I'm like, I don't know, I'm just having way too much fun. I have no. I'll be doing this till I don't know, 70. I don't know. Who knows? But yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
If people are interested in finding out more about you or getting in touch with you, talking to you about their careers, where can they find you?
Yeah, so the best way to get in touch with me is via LinkedIn. So Tracy Hawkins on LinkedIn. Just drop me a message and I will get back to you from there.
Awesome. I've really enjoyed our conversation today and getting to know you a little bit better. And yeah, thank you for doing this with me.
And thank you again for having me, Greg. I've enjoyed our time together.
Awesome. All right. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye.